Welcome to Situational Awareness, a podcast brought to you by MILITARNYI.com. I'm your host, Valentina Kuzik, and today we'll talk to Artem Moroz, a representative of BRAVE1 defense tech cluster in Ukraine. Artem's role is to connect Ukrainian startups with foreign investors. And today he'll unpack what that means. Welcome to Situational Awareness podcast, Artem.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
We are very
glad
happy
to be here.
To see you here. Could you briefly introduce yourself for our international audience and also, of course, talk a little bit about what is BRAVE1?
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Artem Moroz. I'm Head of Investor Relations and Deputy Head of International Cooperation at BRAVE1. I know probably a lot of people from MILITARNYI audience, they know what BRAVE1 is, but in few words, we are a government entity created a little bit more than 2 years ago as direct response to Russian aggression. We were created by key ministries and organizations who are involved in defense, I would say, including Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Digital Transformation, Ministry of Strategic Industries, the General Staff of Ukraine, and others. But currently we are led, and that was the main initiative by Ministry of Digital Transformation because we are about technologies. So in Ukraine, I would say the defense is divided, defense equipment, into two parts. We have legacy equipment that is obviously under Ministry of Defense and in other countries, but we understand that we need to be more creative because we have less resources, right? We need to be sometimes creating some new capabilities that never existed before anywhere in the world, and it is a lot connected with technologies. So organically, we grow to be part of Ministry of Digital Transformation because we are about new technologies. And what we do, we exist to ensure that Ukrainian armed forces, they do have technological advantage over the enemy. Because we understand in manpower, it's very hard to compete with Russia. In legacy equipment, with all this Soviet storages of the equipment, it's also impossible for Ukraine to compete with Russia. So we need to create something that Russia doesn't have. And we believe that this something is technology and innovations.
On your LinkedIn profiles, there is a mention that you basically connect startups, Ukrainian startups, with investors. Can you tell us a bit more about the process itself?
Yeah. So looking deeper into functions of BRAVE1, from supporting the companies from governmental funds, like we provide grants, to also connecting them with the military, organizing testing grounds. And in general, once we find the technology, we want to help to scale those technologies in the front line to ensure that all the units have access to it. But we understand that kind of blood of every business is money, right? So you need to invest, and no matter what kind is the business, you need to have the funds to invest in R&D, to invest in manufacturing. And it's obviously not enough to just have governmental money flowing in. And we also understand that defense is quite a special business that in order to win governmental contracts, especially in other countries, you need to be big. You need to have scaled manufacturing capacity. You need to be able to deliver huge contracts. So what is the way actually how to build this muscle before you actually get to these big contracts? And this is through private investments. Ukraine, unfortunately, we have never enjoyed a reputation of being super investable country or country of startups. And also defense in general, it was seen in a lot of countries as something that is...
And it is still seen.
It is still, it's changing, yeah, but something not the first choice, let's say, for the investors. And we are trying to change that. So our goal is that the founders of defense technologies from Ukraine, they don't need to spend that much time on actually looking for investors, on pitching to them, and we can try and in some way to outsource a little bit their function on our side. And on the other hand, we helped investors to deal with initial concerns that all the investors have, instead of each team explaining why it is important to invest in defense tech, what's special about Ukraine, what is the legislative aspects of it. We're trying to do that. So once teams and investors connect, they kind of already prepared from both sides. Investors understand what to expect, and the teams, they're not talking to cold investors. They know that these people are vetted by BRAVE1, and they already understand a little bit about defense technologies.
Oh, well, there is a lot to unpack here. What does it mean, vetted by BRAVE1?
Yeah, so imagine, just to put it in the context, I'm venture capital fund from, let's say, from Germany, right? I have 10 millions of euros that I want to invest potentially in defense tech. And I hear a lot from the news that Ukrainian defense technologies are great and they want to explore this opportunity because probably once the war is over or just like by scaling, those Ukrainian companies will be able to sell, including back to Germany, and they'll become big companies. So how do I start and how do I get into Ukraine? Because probably I have never been to Ukraine physically, right, as a person. I know nothing about defense as most of the VC funds because for them it's a new industry in general. And I know nothing about Ukrainian defense in particular. So I heard probably about Helsing, about Quantum System and big German defense tech companies, but nothing about Ukrainian. As BRAVE1, we try to be this one-stop shop for everyone, right? So an investor can connect us, just even write on my LinkedIn to make it simple. And we try to understand how much the investor knows about defense tech, how much he knows about Ukraine, and then trying to build this awareness step by step. So understand what are his expectations from the investments, right? What is his willingness kind of like to invest not only from the monetary perspective, but also does he have anything else to add? Is he ready to come to Ukraine, which is also a big blocker for a lot of people, as with any deal, it's a big part of trust and confidence, like in personal connections. And when you have, just like in Ukraine, at least one day on the road, right, with planes, with trains to come physically to Ukraine, and you can't really meet as easily as you would be living in the same country, just like having direct airplane connection, that is creating an extra challenge. Because in defense especially, you need to build this trust in order to make a deal. So we talked with them, we try to understand like what they're looking for, and we try to understand who they are, right? Because this is part of due diligence. Also from our security perspective, we need to understand that these people are valid. Obviously, we're not special services of Ukraine and we have limited resources to check it, but at least some kind of validation we can do. And once we do that, we try to create a community, because we understand that being alone is hard, but when you're part of like bigger community of other investors from different countries who are doing the same as you do, right, who may be invested already, for you it will be easier because you can just follow. You don't need to create anything from scratch. So we have already built in a little bit more than a year a community of more than 400 investors from, I would say, around 40 countries around the globe who are vetted, who want to invest in defense tech in Ukraine, who understand what are the challenges and what are the opportunities, and they're willing to go deeper. Those investors are at different stages of their, let's say, learning cycle. Some of them are just like looking at the teams, understand can it be a good fit for their pipeline? They're talking with their limited partners and like actually their investors into the fund. And some of these investors, they already made like more steps. They're already in advanced talks with the teams. Maybe with some of them, they have already signed the term sheet. And some of these teams, they have already received investments from this Ukrainian international investor.
How many projects received investments?
I would like, if we talk about the teams or projects, defense is a little bit special in terms of like sensitivity of information, obviously. And what's happening is that even BRAVE1 ourselves, we don't know about all the rounds that are happening, because a lot of these rounds are not public, right? In civil world, you attracted funding, and what you would do...
And you issue a press release.
Exactly, you're right. So everybody knows, everybody's happy. In defense, I would say that around 70% of all the deals that are happening are staying in the shadow. For some reasons, sometimes for security reasons, sometimes for other reasons. But in general, we don't know for sure how many deals happened, but what we verified, what we know for sure, that around 90 teams whom we helped as BRAVE1 to attract private capital. And if we put it into dollar figures, last year we helped to attract a little bit more than $40 million in private investments. And this year, from the beginning of the year, we have already helped to attract more than $45 million. So in total, $85 million of private investments that we already did.
So 40 plus 55.
40 plus 45. Yeah.
45.
And we have a target of $100 million for this year to help to attract in private capital.
In total, just for this year?
For this year, right.
Oh, okay. That's an ambitious goal.
Well, sorry, just to add on that, because there are two views. On the one hand, it seems quite ambitious for our ecosystem. especially if we understand that most of the teams are quite early stage. So we are talking about not that huge checks of like $50 million to the team, right? Typically, we are talking about 300,000, 500,000, up to like 3 million. And if we then try to compare it with what is happening in the US or in Germany, where you would see billions, that seems like quite a tiny amount. On the other hand, when we dive deeper into those rounds of financing that are happening there, we see that typically there's one big team like Anduril or like Helsin who attracted like 2 billions, 8 billions, and then it just like shows a huge number for the ecosystem. So we just don't have Andurils yet here in Ukraine, but we do have a very solid number of pre-seed, seed, or a little bit like later stage, late seed companies who are doing outstanding job in developing their technologies, who are building their pipeline, who learn how to sell in Ukraine internationally, and those companies are raising, and those companies are great bet for the Ukrainian international investors.
Well, I agree. We also talked to Yaroslav Azhnyuk, and he compares like investments in just private companies doing like civic things, and in defense. And unfortunately, this is striking. I mean, that the defense is so underfunded. And then we are coming back to the investors. You mentioned a little bit about the challenges that investors are facing, like they don't know us personally, they don't know the companies, it's all like a little bit shadowish. What are their objections? You know, when you talk to investors, they definitely have some hesitations. They see some risks in Ukraine. What are those?
Frankly speaking, before looking at objections, I would actually just highlight that the ecosystem is so young that most of the teams, they have started to talk with investors maximum like 1.5 years ago, right? Before that, there were no talks, no venture capital markets in general. So if you look what the teams and the ecosystem has achieved in this 1.5 years, it's quite striking. And from my perspective, I remember when joining BRAVE1 in February 24, and seeing like those teams who are pitching sometimes like for first time in their lives, they were pitching to investors, they are looking for funding. Most of the teams who have like good product, who have technology, and who invested their time in pitching and presenting their company to investors in this year and a half, I would say 90% of those companies, they attracted capital. So it's not something impossible. It's rather that in Ukraine, we want to move faster because we are living in a wartime. And this is the same that happens in the procurement cycle. We see like sanctions and other parts, just we are living, and we need to understand, we are living with European Union, with the US in different timelines and different pace. We are in the wartime and they are in the peaceful time. And it's same applies to investors. If investment rounds for pre-seed company in a new sphere, in a new country, somewhere else takes 1 year, it's considered okay in most of the countries. But in Ukraine, we have much more urgent need. So that's what we actually, why we are not satisfied. And obviously we all need to do more. But looking at real objections, right? First, country risk. And we are not talking about only like legislation or other parts that we are missing, but just it takes time for the investors to get used to something. It takes time for them to understand how the things are done in Ukraine, how it's operation, what are the legal structure, what are the foundations, like how the country kind of lives, right? Because they know, frankly speaking, nothing about Ukraine when they first have the idea that they want to look at defense tech.
Yeah, or something not very complimentary, like a corruption thing, yeah?
True. That is true, and we can't change the reputation in one day. Right, so that's a responsibility of all of us to do small steps. That takes time, obviously, but to change this, and also part of responsibility of the founders to deliver in a very transparent way, like what they're doing, to report once they attracted investment in a small one, to give a clear understanding that investor is not like some rich guy who would come give you like $100,000 and you forget about him. He's your partner. He's part of your company, right? And this is a long-term partner. So it is extremely important to build these relations, not thinking about what would happen like a year from now, but what would happen in 10 years from now. And also understanding the obligations of the investor in front of their investors. So it's part of the founders of the company to actually deliver those returns that the investor promised to their investor, to their LP. whole piece. So first is about the country. The second one, I would say, is also about the readiness of the teams. And our ecosystem is very different from the founder profile from most of the ecosystem in other countries, because typically you would see a like CEO or founder who is fundraising, he's like a rock star. Like he is a salesperson or she, and they are great at pitching, they're great at presenting, they're great at networking. But what would you see in Ukraine? You will see great engineers. And we know that sometimes engineers are not the best entrepreneurs, and sometimes they're not the best salespeople, despite they're creating some outstanding stuff. So whenever investors come in, they have their background, what they learned in their investment career, right? And they're used to some kind of like founder profile.
Yeah.
And then they're seeing the guys who do not know how to pitch, who are just like focusing on technical stuff, talking like they can talk for hours about some technical specifications that investors wouldn't understand even. And then investors think maybe it's the wrong team. Maybe that's like a not right profile, because what he learned before in entire his career is telling to him like that's a red light. Yeah, you don't go with that, because like based on that you know that who you should invest to win. And it takes time to understand that it's different. So we are not like in the US and Silicon Valley, you try to sell the product and then you build the product. In Ukraine, you try to build the product, send it to the front line, get the feedback, get a lot of iteration, and then at some point you're trying to sell it and commercialize and build a structure. So it takes time for investors to understand this and how hard it is if they never been to Ukraine, not coming physically and not meeting these people. Like Zoom calls are great, but are you able to explain this huge gap in the mindset of the companies and the ecosystem within like an hour of Zoom call? Probably not. So it takes really time for both parties, for our founders to become more investable, even like from personality perspective, and also from the preparation perspective, and from the investors, from VC funds and angel investors. It takes time for them to learn like that the ecosystem, it's okay. Like you invest in technical founders, and they can sometimes not be the best pitchers and not the best salespeople, but they are creating something that is really outstanding. And at some point, either they will develop these capabilities themselves, these skills to sell, or they would hire somebody who is great in selling.
Or Brave will help them.
We can assist, but it's also important, and it's misleading for a lot of our founders, because they believe, like on our examples, that Brave would help to connect with investors, so we don't need to do anything. We are just we organize demo days, for instance. We have already organized 18 pitch sessions for the teams to give them an opportunity to pitch in front of investors. It's more than, I believe, 140 teams that pitched. And what unfortunately I'm seeing that some of the teams are great. They understand this is the first opportunity for them to present in the world. But what's next? They need to look for investors. They need to write. They need to proactively approach. But then there is another part of the team that they pitched at our event, and they are saying, when is your next pitch session? So we will be there. We are waiting for that. And unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. So we are first window, we are first accelerator, but it's up to you. Like nobody else except you as a founder would be able to actually attract those investments.
Okay, so you are encouraging the startups to build their own capacity, to communicate with investors.
Exactly. And we are doing it on the one hand by connecting them with investors, but also on the other hand, because there is not enough talks about defense as a business. And what we learned, that as a company, you can create much bigger impact than as engineering team, right? Because company, and we're talking about the impact on the
building
battlefield.
Ecosystem, you mean?
I mean on the battlefield. Because like the company, you deliver more to the battlefield. Like no matter how much you actually work, like yourself, like how many hours you spend like in your lab and garage, whatever you're doing, like working on the product, if you are thinking as a team of like, how do I get +1 product or like a little bit better and then deliver it to the front line, compared to whenever you try to build it as a company, to build a foundation of this,
and to attract funding
and start thinking as a company, not as a small team, but rather as like organization. Sometimes say no to some opportunities, sometimes like prioritizing some other opportunities. That is making the difference, and that is making the difference on the front line. So we really see one of the, like from my personal conversations with the founders, I remember one of the companies that is doing initiator boards, right, for the drones. And they claim that those boards are some of the best what they do, and there is a huge queue from the military. Say, great. And understanding that components for investors is a little bit even like more interesting to invest in than the finished goods.
Because like, it's kind of universal?
It's kind of universal. You have more buyers. You don't need to sell to the government, but you sell to the businesses, which is sometimes easier. So I say, yeah, we are happy to support you. We're happy to provide. And then the founder says, yeah, so we need money to manufacture 25,000 of this, let's say, and deliver it to the front line. And the issue that we don't want to put any profit margin on that. So we want to sell them at a cost. And because we don't want to make money out of war. And initial thinking, kind of like you think, yeah, great guys, right?
Value-driven.
Yeah, value-driven and everything. But what is happening is that imagine that they can fund not investor, but some like charity fund or some investor who just want to donate. They get the money for this 25,000, they manufacture it, they deliver it to the front line. And what happens next? They're not able to do anything else, right? Because they have never thought about the future. They will go again to find some donations. But instead, if they put the normal profit margin, right, and have this profit to reinvest in better R&D, in the team, in the manufacturing facility, how much more impact they would create on the battlefield. So,
how do they react when they hear your thoughts? What's their response?
Unfortunately, we still have that mindset that profit is bad in a lot of cases.
It's like Sovietish, yeah?
Yes, it is. Unfortunately, like we really see it. And those people who had like commercial background before, they change it. But if you're an engineer, you never thought about commercials, you're doing something that your conscience is saying to do. You don't have to take money from the soldiers. They're protecting us. But unfortunately, it's not work that way. And you are creating more damage than the benefit. Because in most cases, your company would go bankrupt at some point, and very, very short point of time. You create the impact for the battlefield, but probably only once or twice, because you are not sustainable. And you are all the time relying on someone else, somebody who needs to come and solve all your problems. So as long as we have, and this obviously it's not for all the teams, but there is this like share of the teams, for as long as we think about the profit as something that you just take out of the business and put into your pocket, it's the wrong approach. Your profit is opportunity to invest in R&D, to become better, and actually to support the army more.
Yeah, exactly. I'm wondering, like, from the pool of investors, you've mentioned 400 people you're talking to, yeah? How many do have experience with defense?
It's interesting to like truly look at, because most of like us, right, we gained experience in defense in the last few years, right? Same with investors. Most of these people, they have never been in defense. They understand what investing is about. Sometimes they do have the LPs from the military, but or even like general partners from the military, but what is happening is the military has changed too so much.
Oh, right? Wow, yeah.
So somebody who knew how tanks operate, or how huge vessels like airship carriers can like deliver the benefit on the front line. And for instance, if you operate a huge like submarine, and now you're looking at Ukrainian like Magura type unmanned surface vehicle, in most cases you're a little bit like skeptical about the opportunities, and you are transferring these ideas as well to the fund. So it's not enough to be in the military and understand defense. It's crucial to understand like modern defense and how much it changed. And it takes, in most cases, not your previous background, but rather how fast you're able to learn now, because it changed in the last few years.
Yeah, but we probably do have the investors for those new unicorns like Takeover and Helsing as investors of those companies approaching you, because what everybody is saying that like defense innovation is happening in Ukraine. So probably if you're an investor dealing with defense, you should come to BRAVE1. Is it so? Do you have those people with you?
We do talk with those people who invested in like Takeover, for instance, but I would say we would be like too lazy if we just waited for them to approach us. So last year we did a lot of cold outreach which is some probably not very usual for the government, just to write cold emails. But we try to do it, and we understand that it's critical to build this community at the beginning, to give the clear message, because we are here, we understand what BRAVE1 is, we understand about the ecosystem, but if we go outside of Ukraine, most probably those messages are lost, right? Most of the news and everything that we have in the Ukrainian language. We lack English trusted media that are reporting not about the war as horrors of the war and situations on the battlefield, but something from the behind. We are lacking information about the business that is happening, about startups.
We are trying here to fill the gap.
yeah, you are doing a great job, and I believe you really there's a big value for this niche, and it creates a big impact from the investor perspective, because they get this verified information, from international companies perspective, because they start to understand what they should be working on, not just what they heard somewhere and what maybe they think in the labs that it should be a logical step to develop. Because what we are seeing in a lot of cases when companies come to Ukraine, that they're bringing something that we understood 2 years ago, that it doesn't make sense even to invest, to look at, and they invest in huge funds. That's something that doesn't work and is not needed on the front line. Yeah. And for them, it's a big frustration as well, because they invested, big teams are working on that, and they expect whenever they bring it to Ukraine that we will be so excited to see it, and we just sharing the purchasing orders. But we say that, yeah, thank you for coming, but maybe here you should change that, and then there's a huge list of changes, or maybe you should build something from scratch, understanding what is needed now. So it's a big gap for the investor perspective. Indeed, some great funds, they learned what new generation defense is, and they build this knowledge and capabilities. But I would say that first of all, those investors who are bold enough to come to Ukraine, to be here, sometimes coming to the front line, talking with the soldiers, talking with the units, because as the companies, the best what you can do is talk to your customer, talk to your end user. And same for the investor supply. But unfortunately, we also see the other perspective that investors thinking that it is okay to stay wherever they are, let's say in European, very comfortable for living country, listen to what the portfolio companies or what's well-branded defense companies say to them, and take it as truth. And unfortunately, myself, talking to those funds, whenever they say, here's our portfolio company, and it's delivering huge results in Ukraine, and I personally know that those companies, it's not true at all. For them, it is a shock. Because they invested millions of dollars in those companies. They are so sure that they are great and outstanding. There is nothing else in Ukraine similar to that. But then somebody from Ukraine is saying to them that it's extremely far from true. It's not used on the front line. It's just staying in the best case somewhere in storages. And that's a lack of due diligence and lack of also willingness from the investor to understand.
That's very interesting. And there is a lot to unpack here as well. Because I wanted to ask you also about how you do the due diligence for Ukrainian companies that you are packing for the investors' assessment. But the case you mentioned is really interesting because as I imagine, if I'm an investor and I'm investing in a company, I assume that I do have some return on investment, not just looking at the presentation where I am said that we've been successful on the front line, because being successful on the front line is basically being bought by Ukrainian government or any other external stakeholder. I mean, governments from NATO countries and other European countries.
Yes, sir. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. So if you got my question, how those investors understand the situation, how do they believe it? What is their understanding of successful product?
Sometimes being bought by the government of your home country and then for the equipment to be then donated to Ukraine, it doesn't mean that technological that equipment is
it
great.
Is advanced. Okay.
Yeah, it can mean that the local government wants to support local defense manufacturers who can be great or sometimes not that great, and it's more economic stimulus. It's not the sign that it is working on the front line, and unfortunately that is happening. And some investors taking it as a sign that it's also means a great product. It's really more in Ukraine and in BRAVE1 we give grants to support the companies that can become great, or in some cases like they fail, right? Because it's life. Same here, but it goes through a governmental procurement.
Yeah, fair enough. Are you explaining that to investors?
We talk to them. Not all of them want to believe this, right? Because obviously they seem that...
especially if they are from the same country.
Yeah. Especially if they invested like 10 million euro in that, it's very hard to believe that something is not working as they expect. So we indeed trying to explain to them, trying to not to be too harsh, but trying to give some evidence and understanding like it's great that those companies are in Ukraine. It's great that they are learning, but also the main value today, at least like in my opinion, it's not in technology itself as it is today, because the dynamics of the front line of the war is so high. So whatever works today most probably will not be the same in 3 months or even less. So when in Ukraine, when talking to the teams and talking to investors, most probably they invest not in the technology, but they invest in the process of constant iteration. If the company is able to build a system that is just catching this feedback and able to deploy it so fast in their products and change. So whenever a product from outside of Ukraine is coming to the front line, let's assume that it performs really well during the battlefield test. What happens that a lot of those companies would go back, put the stamp battle proven. Imagine that it was battle proven. In most cases, unfortunately, it would be somewhere far away.
Tested, let's say.
Yeah. Tested, somewhere in testing ground next to Kyiv. In most cases, it wouldn't work well, but they go back to their countries and they say, we've been to Ukraine. Our solution performed great. So now let's start. You need to procure our system. You need to prepare and to take all the great messages, put into the right presentation. They have great government relations teams, so essentially the sales teams. And they would be happy to sell this current version. In best case scenario, it worked. But what happens if you look at like 6 months from now? That version that was great is no longer great.
Yeah.
And
they already spent like tens of thousands of dollars for that, or euros.
Rather in millions. But for sure, like the government spent on that. The team is so happy that like they're getting governmental contracts. Investors are so happy because that equipment is bought. But what really happens is that the team is not developing something that is need to be developed because they're so happy about what is the current status quo.
No, it's not innovating the product itself.
Yeah. On the other hand, investors are putting the money in something that is not really creating the extra benefit for the defense, for national security, and the government is spending taxpayers' money on something that is not working as well, something that is already outdated by default.
Wow. Are you also channeling this message to the governments? Of allying countries?
For sure. Like we understand that we need to deliver because typically we can talk about economic stimulus of investing in local production. But when we are in defense, we need to talk about national security. And no matter how great economic stimulus, national security still should be high. And we learned this lesson as Ukraine, right? It's like a very hard way. So for our allies, it's also important to understand that it's sometimes better to buy something different, not from their own country, or at least like try to find the best model with joint ventures or with other stuff where you can get this right technology, very like really battle proven, really tested, working closely with the battlefield unit, and then start procuring it for your government instead of buying something that was close to the battlefield, but that what is well marketed and branded.
We also should teach our startups to do better marketing, probably.
True, but it's also the question of resources, right? So
yeah, definitely.
In a lot of cases, startups, like even more mature companies, they want to focus on the products, they want to focus on the battlefield, which is super like respectful thing to do. I often ask myself a question like, what would happen when the export from Ukraine for the defense equipment is open? And our companies, they try to enter those European Union, let's say, markets, and we will face this battle of Ukrainian companies who have great product, who are really battle proven, but who do not have great marketing and do not have government relations, so no sales experience, also like international sales. And then we have European companies who are there like on their local markets, who have both like great market and sales, but whose technology is not like is somewhere average, let's say. So who would be winning? Like, would these European companies be able to catch
European
up?
companies will buy Ukrainian companies.
Who knows? We sometimes our Ukrainian founders are quite arrogant that they don't want to sell for some reasonable price. Sometimes foreign companies are too greedy and just given like the price that is much lower than the market share. So it's an open question, like what would happen, but it's an interesting situation to look at.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a little bit more about the investors that coming to BRAVE1. If I go to BRAVE1 website there and click the button, want to be a partner or an investor, there are a couple of options what I can do. I can build a joint company and share some tech components. So what usually an average investor prefers to do, or a usual investor starts with?
So in most cases, all investors are the same. They want to earn money, right? The more they can earn in a short period of time is better. So what's the market is currently at that level of maturity when it would be most probably traditional like venture capital style investments. When you invest, you buy like 5 to 20% stake in the company. And ideally, you want to sell the stake within like 3, 5, 7 years and get your maximum return in X, right? Numbers. I believe we'll be start to see more of joint ventures and M&A activities, but it takes time. The ecosystem needs to be a little bit more mature. So you need to have, for the joint ventures, you need to have more structured companies who invested also in their IP, in like IP protection, who builds the legal structure, not to go into the joint venture as equal partners, but not as somebody like who just like trying to learn by the way. And on the other hand, for M&A, we start to see it as well, especially bigger Ukrainian companies are starting to buy small engineering teams, integrating it into their teams, and we are already seeing some international companies giving signs of M&A. Good example is Quantum Systems. On our last event, international event by BRAVE1 at Defense Tech Innovations Forum in February, actually that negotiation was built, the foundation for it. So Frontline and Quantum System were together at our exposition. They liked each other. Quantum System wanted to add this product to their product line. We're talking about anti-FPV turrets with AI guidance, and they agreed like principally on the investment. And finally, like a little bit later, it was announced that Quantum System has acquired 10% of Frontline with the opportunity to increase the stake up to 25%. So great sign of joint venture from new generation defense prime from Germany, which is already a unicorn, and another great Ukrainian startup company that is growing fast, developing great solutions. So in most cases, what's great that you wouldn't be the first to do something. We already have investments, we already have joint ventures like Skyaton and Prevail Partners recently to create a joint venture in the UK, like M&As like on Quantum System. So it's more now the question not to say that it is possible, but rather scaling of the opportunities that are already there.
Great. I want to end off any kind of optimistic message or something, but I would like you to maybe, if you have a message to our audiences. We do hope that we have defense tech companies watching us and potential investors. What's your message?
I probably won't say anything new, just like they hear a lot, both investors and defense companies from outside of Ukraine, that if you are not in Ukraine, you are not in defense business. And this is true. We've seen the situation when, even with investors, I remember so clearly that a lot of people, like a lot of investors talking to our founders, seeing this like engineers, they thought, okay, maybe I'll just try to see as much as I can on the market and build my own company using that knowledge. They tried it, they failed. Then the next step of the evolution of knowledge was, okay, yeah, I can't build it myself, but probably I can invest in some of the European companies which I'm like more comfortable with, or like US companies, whatever. give them the money because they know how to pitch, like they are from the European Union, understand this legislation. They will try to copy a little bit something what is done in Ukraine. We will add a little bit like more of our internal innovation, and at that point we'll be super successful and much better than what this Ukrainian engineers are offering. It also failed. There are some still investors who are trying to do that, but we know it fails because just we are living in different realities, right? We are in the wartime, and the pace of this innovation, connection with the front line, you can't beat it when you are in the peaceful time, 9 to 5. So we are getting to this understanding that, okay, I can't build it myself. Companies from the peaceful countries, they can't build it too. They can create some great capabilities, but generally, Ukrainian startups are winning in this, in terms of like technologies at least. So, and there are already investors who made these bets, who actually invested early on, and we have a number of VC funds who invested like from pre-seed, starting like at relatively small checks with like $100,000. They acquired a good stakes in the company, and what they are now enjoying, at least like on paper, they enjoying like extreme returns because the valuation of the companies itself, like the sales, grew so much that we have companies who are like 1 or 2 years old, who have revenues of more than like $100 million. And in most of the countries, those companies would be unicorns, right? So the ecosystem is developing. So it's really, you can't replicate it somewhere else. You need to invest in Ukraine. You need to invest in Ukrainian companies. You need to understand the market, like give yourself some time to learn, but don't take too long because valuations are getting higher. But what is also something special is that by investing in Ukrainian defense tech and dual-use technologies, you are doing two things. So first, you are doing something that is right because you are investing in technologies that are protecting democracies, protecting your country as well. And from a pragmatic point of view, investing in defense, it protects your other assets. It's like a hedge. If you own real estate, if you own any kind of like factories, whatever, if you invest in defense, you're protecting those real estate. You're protecting the factories, you're protecting all other things that you have. So it's right to do, but also from financial point of view, this is a place where you can actually generate some outstanding financial returns because first you're investing in something that is battle-proven, is great in terms of technology, and second, because we're in the market that is growing so fast. We sometimes forget or don't realize that we are in the global rearmament, something that the industry, one of the biggest industries in the world that was built after Second World War, it has never gone through such challenges and transformation as it is going now. So you are at the early stage of the huge market, and you have this opportunity to get in, not with such a huge amount of money, like with few $100,000, you already can like get stakes in some of the very promising company, invest in that, and you can expect first returns through these defense acquisitions that will be happening in Ukraine, and in the other parts of the world, because we need to change from legacy equipment to new generation of equipment. And then at some time, we also know that what technologies were created in the Second World War, most of those technologies, they switched to civil life, like internet, and created a bigger boom, like in commercial sector. So we can expect the history to repeat itself as it always repeats. And those technologies that are created in Ukraine, they will be used in the civil sector. Just not push like too hard. We need to win the war, having these technologies, investing and giving resources to the founders that they need. Second part, win the global defense market through these great technologies that testing in the battlefield. And then once we're in a better time, and so we can at some way like be strong enough to have enough deterrence and focus on peace, we can start switching those technologies into civil life and really making them dual use and generating good returns in the commercial sector.
I hope we managed to build this sense of urgency and importance of the moment feeling with this conversation, Artem.
Yeah,
thank you for being with us. And for our listeners, subscribe, like, comment, and you'll have more conversations like this in English from inside Ukraine.